In the previous video, we learned about the staff and the treble clef. But we also noticed there was a sort of a limitation to the treble clef. And let me draw another treble clef here so we can explore this. So here's our treble clef, and remember the treble clef tells us that the second line of the staff is going to be the G above middle C. And the lowest note that we could hit on the treble clef was the E. If we put a note head on this first line, that told us to play the E that is right above middle C. And I'll remind us down on this keyboard here. There's the E above middle C. And the highest note we could hit on the treble clef is the F that is an octave above middle C, and that's the F right down here. But we discovered that's really only a very small part of the piano keyboard. And hey, maybe we want to tell somebody to play notes higher than the F or lower than the E. So how do we do that? Well, to get to one note above and one note below is really easy. If we want to go to one note above F on the line, on the fifth line, we just write a note head sitting on top of the staff, and that tells us to play G, so that's pretty easy. And if we want to do the same thing going down, if we want somebody to play the note that is below E, we can just use that staff, that space that's sitting below the staff, put a note head there, and that's going to tell somebody to play D. But that still leaves a lot of the piano keyboard untouched. So what we have to do is we have to bring in these imaginary extensions of the staff. And I'm going to try to do this freehand here. Maybe a little bit messy, but it'll give you the basic idea. Imagine that instead of just being 5 lines and 4 spaces, that we continued, or we imagined that we continued these lines, these parallel lines, going down and going down and going down and going down as long as we needed them. And we can do the same thing up here, up on the top, sort of just continuing these staff lines, and we can imagine that that they go all from one side of the paper to the other. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to borrow some of these extra staff lines, and we're going to use them to create what we call ledger lines. L-E-D-G-E-R. Ledger lines. So for instance, suppose I want to tell somebody to play the note that is directly below D, which would be C. And in fact, that would happen to be middle C, this C right here, the 4th C on the piano keyboard. What I would do is I would imagine that there's another staff line there below this D, and I'm going to write the note head on it, just like that. And so that, in fact, is how we write middle C in the treble clef. And we can keep going like this. If I, for instance, went down to the note below C, that would be B. I would just imagine that it's in sort of the imaginary space below that line. And notice, by the way, I don't write an additional line below. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave that bottom line to my imagination. So I'm not going to write that. I'm just going to write the line on top. I could go even further if I wanted to go to the line below that. I'm sorry, go to the note below that, the A. I would go down here and put 2 of those sort of imaginary or extended staff lines. And I could keep on going down really as low as I wanted to. And I can do the same thing on the upper side of the treble clef as well. Suppose I want to go above this G. Well, I just use another one of my imaginary staff lines up here. So we'll imagine that there's another sort of staff line right here. And I'll write a note head through it, and that is A. That's kind of a messy A, so I'm going to redo that. We, by the way, will be talking a lot about how you can write music by hand consistently and neatly. That's going to be a big topic of some upcoming videos, so I'm going to make it a point to make that a little bit neater. I could go up to the B above that. So that's the A, that's the B, in the imaginary space above there. I could go up to the 2 lines above. That would put me on C. And this, by the way, this is now the C that is 2 octaves above middle C. Remember, here's middle C down here. Here is the C that is 1 octave above it, and here is that C that is 2 octaves above on the ledger lines. And again, I could keep going and going and going. Suppose I wanted to do an F up there. I could do something that looks like this. So that's 1, 2, 3 ledger lines and a space above. That is the F. That is 2 octaves above middle C. Now, this is useful, especially if we want to get a little bit further down to the left side of the keyboard and a little bit further up. But imagine if I wanted to, say, hit some of these notes that are way down here. Suppose I want to hit this note, the C that's below middle C. Let's actually try this, because you'll see this once in a while, but it's a little bit of a pain. So to hit that C that is below middle C, I would need to go to, remember my C, middle C is on this ledger line. The space below that would be B. The line below that would be A. The space below that would be G. The line below that would be F. The space below that would be E. The line below that would be D. And then, if I put a note head right there, that would be the C below middle C. But notice we're starting to run out of room. Like we can't practically do a whole lot more ledger lines without it being, without it crashing into the staff below, without it being pretty difficult to read and to write. So that's when we come up with a solution that you will see in the next video.